Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. And welcome to the Dutch Game Gardens incubation sessions. This is a Q&A with Marina de Kanter, Marina de Kanter, sorry. The overall story of today is that that your budget is the decision maker when it comes to challenges that your company faces, right?
Sort of.
Sort of.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's a tool.
It's a tool for decision making.
It's a great tool.
Could you introduce yourself first?
Okay, well, hello, I'm Marina de Kanter. Marina. I have worked my whole life in finance, basically. I ended up for my studies in an American college by accident, and it was actually a business college that was also by accident, because I didn't know what to do with my life at that stage. And within the business college, the only thing I found that I could sort of work with was the finance major, because accounting wasn't my thing, and marketing I wasn't so good at, etc. And from there on, I worked for a bank initially, and after that, I got fed up with the financial markets, so I went to do a master's also in business administration, but in Manchester, England, in the middle of real industry, and actually I stuck with financial positions in companies, and somehow I always ended up in small companies or small type companies, and well, somehow the connection got made. Well, we can talk about that. One of your fellow group people who actually left the group, Bram, is in a sort of business breakfast group with me, and he told me about this group and how you also had to think about how you finance and budget your company. And well, that's how I got to talk to Menno, and now I'm sitting here. A bit worried that I have the right material for you, and but we'll see how it goes. So, and I worked both in industrial company, investment companies, as also in the cultural companies, non-profit, also social companies. So we'll see if there's an overlap.
Right. Well, thank you. As I said, like we started that the budget is a tool for decision making, right? And I remember, like in our preparations for this Q&A, you told me about working at the Spoorweg Museum, and you had to convince the local
museum, by the way.
By the way, a great museum, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you've been part of the construction of the great new museum, right? The whole innovation that was there, and those were a lot of financial decisions that you had to make.
Yeah.
There was one in particular that I found really interesting.
Okay.
That had to do with the Dam Tower and the construction of the huge high building.
Yeah.
Can you shed some light on that?
Okay, yeah, well, quick introduction. The museum used to be an old railway station and a huge park area. And in the park area there were trains. At some stage, the director figured out that if the trains were going to be in the park for much longer, there wouldn't be trains anymore to show to the public because they were rusting away. So he managed to get a big amount of money from the Dutch railway system, the NS, 70 million guilders at that stage, to build basically a museum that would actually save all these trains, which would have to be a building. If you roughly know where it is, it's right in the middle of a living area, a housing area, basically, where it's not offices or anything like that. And all these people were used to having a nice park in their backyard. And now all of a sudden we were coming up with a building that had to be quite high because we had to fit these trains. So we had budgeted the whole design, and well, you get the building, the design, etc., 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 as part of this 70 million. But also we figured we needed to keep in contact with the people who lived around the museum, quite a big group. because, you know, in Holland, well, hopefully in most places, not in China here, for your building permits, the people who live around have an impact on what happens. So very early on we had meetings, and we heard that a big issue for people was that they were convinced. We showed them the building, etc. They were convinced they were not going to see the Dom Tower anymore. And that was a major issue from their houses, streets, etc. Because that would mean, you know, the end. It was a big thing. Well, you have to pick these things up, you know. I mean, you can laugh at it and think, nonsense. But that we realized that would have delayed us in a big way. So we had no budget for this. What happened afterwards is this 3D imaging. And here we're talking 2001, 2002. So you probably know better how 3D development was at that stage. It was still quite experimental, but we were lucky that the building company that we were, or the architect company that we were using was wanted to start to use this. So we had no budget. I mean, it was expensive, but they came up with this idea, and we figured if we don't do this, we'll have a big delay in building.
They made a 3D model of the railway station, so you could actually see that you could see the Dom Tower from their houses.
We could show them exactly. We had sort of a flying, and I mean, now it's absolutely normal, but then it wasn't. And but it was a big decision because it was not in the budget. And in the end, we decided we would take part of the communication marketing budget that we had for the whole project, because we considered this part of communication marketing. And if we would have delays, you know, our whole budget would have been blown anyway. So it's an example of how you move within budgets. And the nice thing is showing this rather basic movie, you know, convinced the people exactly. They saw the building, they saw their own houses, and that they could still see the Dome Tower.
Sounds like really arbitrary when you're starting creating something like this big. And then you need to convince people by spending a lot of money, and by shifting it from construction to more of communication budget, then you were able to finance it and get it done, and also get the construction done.
Yeah, and the good thing was the architect was keen to start experimenting. So that's another nice thing, always look for partners in paying for something.
All right, that's smart.
You can be very creative with that, you know. Sometimes it's somewhere where you don't expect it. Here we didn't expect it, but it came up this way.
You also worked at smaller companies, and I can imagine that that you help them out with decision making based on their budget. Is that true?
Yeah, or actually, many of them didn't have budgets to start with.
All right.
So we started making budgets first, and then I introduced the making of decisions on the basis of budget. And, well, we might get into it a little bit further down. I mean, it sounds horrible, budgets.
I don't know. Does it sound horrible to you? That's a mixed feeling here.
Mixed feeling.
Yeah.
Do you need an income to have a budget?
No. There's many types of budgets. Cost budgets is one of them. But no, the idea is, but I'll just short. The idea is a budget is not something alien. A budget is you. A budget is what you do. And that is also how I convinced the people in some of the smaller companies that I worked in, who said, we're doing fine, et cetera, et cetera. I said, yeah, but if you just figure out what you do and who you are, then you can always see where you go. And if something unexpected happens, you can relate back to, hey, how did I figure this out in the first place, and what is the impact? And then it comes very close to you. It's not something that is out there or somebody tells you to do. It's your own thing, and you make your own decisions. And in the big way, the museum example that I just gave you, I mean, that was a big budget. But again, it was something that we decided on, and it allowed us to say this unexpected thing happened, which was quite vital to the project, and we had to be creative in the sense of, okay, where do we get the money? But because we knew how everything was allocated, we could make a well-founded decision to say, okay, we take something of there. That means we can't do a certain thing, but it saves the project. So that is in the small companies as well. I don't know. I can give you an example of a country estate. This sounds big. It's a lot of land, but gamekeepers, farmers on it, they just did their thing. You know, they were like, hey, I need so many, I need lots of birds for a shooting estate. You know, people want to come there and that is the income of the estate. So the more, the better, etc. And the feed, etc. And we just, I know how much it is. I know how much it's feed. But we saw money leaking away, and they didn't know if it was too many birds, or if it was feed that was lost, or if it was, they didn't even know if it was not enough shoots. The answer to all the money leaking away was, oh, we need more people to come, we need more people to come, so we need to do marketing. But because they had no insight in exactly, you know, what was needed for what, they hadn't thought, okay, how much do we need for one group of people to come?
So what did they find out? Like they created a budget.
So it was hard work, because with every question I asked, and you'll find that yourself, you say, I don't know. I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know. I don't know. So what I said then, okay, choose something. Is it 100? No. Is it 1,000? No. Okay, I said, take 500 and start working through the numbers and see where you come out. And in some states you come out and say, okay, well, I took 500 birds, tons of feed, whatever in this case. I know how much goes in now. That will only get me 1 month. Is that reasonable or is that not reasonable? Could I go back, etc. And because you start with really what you do yourself, you know what you're on about. So you can relate to what you've put down if you've made a choice and say, wait, if I calculate this through, it doesn't make sense. And with these gamekeepers, they were like, you know, I don't want to, it goes well, I don't want to actually, you know, you telling me what to do. I said, I'm not telling you what to do. You tell me what you do. And then we'll go through it and we'll see. And if it comes out minus lots, then I say, hey, wait a minute, we have to do something. Because minus doesn't work. Then we can maybe go on for a year, but not for 2 years. Then we have to close the whole place. And then keeping track of the numbers after they decided what to do, it helped also as a motivational factor to keep track, to see what happens. It also, you know, helps you as a motivation to keep track of what you're doing. Because keeping track of what you're doing is sometimes also a pain. But if you see and you can relate it exactly back to what you planned, it starts to live, if I can say it like that. So I don't know if
Does that make
you
sense
feel
anyone?
that I'm telling fairy tales now that a budget can live for you. But I don't know, does it make sense? Can you follow? Keep if you keep it very close to yourself. It could be the other way as well.
Only when you mess up, you actually start paying attention to it. As long as things go right, you don't care.
Well, that's the problem, and that's why, you know, sometimes it's better to just keep track and don't make it too complicated. And the nice thing is sometimes you see things go better, and then you can actually decide, hey, wait a minute, I counted on, if we stick to these gamekeepers, 500 tons of feed.
You might even be able to lower it and get more.
I can lower it,
profit and
so I can buy a few more of these dogs that I need. And actually, so even these people out in the country, I got them really enthusiastic for keeping the budget. And sometimes they were going overboard and going way into much detail, et cetera, et cetera. And so, but it started to live, and that is the most important thing. If you have a budget and it doesn't live for you, don't bother. You know, don't bother. It's paperwork. Right. You just do something because you have to do it. That's, I think, a clear message regarding to budgets.
So yeah, we were talking about the railway museum and the gatekeepers.
Yeah.
Have you worked with game companies as well?
No.
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 That's why you're here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
No. But I figured, well, I think all companies, in a sense, are the same for the basics of running a company. If you're doing birds or bits or bytes or whatever you guys do, in a sense, you can always find some basic parameters that are essential to your business. And sometimes you have to think about these parameters. Sometimes you have to experiment with them. But they're always there, and those are the ones that you work with. And the basics are always the same, that you take the parameters and you decide how high they are, how big they are, whatever, and what impact they have together. And you can always then go back and say, hey, this was my parameter for amounts of bird feed. The results are different.
But it feels like a pain. Like I remember that I had to start counting my hours.
Yeah, that's one.
That's one, which is a pain. Because I discovered that I actually not working that hard as I thought I was.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Which is also painful. So I didn't really like. Actually, I was making long days, but I wasn't really productive. And by keeping track of my hours, I figured like, okay, I'm now working on this. I cannot do anything else right now because otherwise I have to change my toggle. That's too much work. So maybe I'll just keep working on this aspect. So I was far more focused by counting my hours and stuff. But also that nowadays, if I want to invest time in something, we also allocate like an hourly rate to it. Spending 4 hours on something that's not really useful will cost us more, like 400 euros.
Mm-hmm.
That's tough.
Yeah, but it shows you.
It does show me, yeah. So, and it also, like, because I've been talking to lots of startups right here, right now, with all our incubees, and some of them, I'm not calling anybody names, so I'm looking at them right now, but the thing is, like, he told me, like, yeah, it's fine, like, 25 euros an hour, that's fine by me. So would it be, in my opinion, that's way too low when it comes to setting your hourly rate?
Yeah, I think hourly rate, like all parameters, but in this specific case, depends on your own situation, your own living circumstances. I mean, if you look at, for instance, the Chamber of Commerce has a, what they call it, geldboek for startups or something. Actually, I can, I think it's just in Dutch, but I can recommend you to go through that. But if you see that, they start with what is your personal situation. Everybody has to eat, everybody needs a roof over their head, and it costs money. That's the way it is. Left, right, or center. That is our economy as such. And you can be annoyed about it, but I think it's good to consider it as a number in your business. So initially for your hourly rate, start with looking, okay, what are my costs? What does my house cost? What does my family cost? What insurance? And try to get that story full. I can tell you from my own experience, I quit a job and I studied for a year, and I figured I'd make a budget for that. being my profession, you know. And I thought I had found I've put all my costs down. And during the year, gosh, this insurance, I completely forgot about it. All of a sudden, that had to be repaired. Didn't think about it. So an advice to you is go, if you initially want to get a number on your hourly rate and an idea, doesn't have to be the one, but just for yourself to have an idea, go through your old bank statements. Just for the past 2 years and see what came through. And you'll see a lot of things that you have completely forgotten about in your daily expenses. And you can also see what you spend on in the bar and things like that, and see how big that part is, and if you want to continue with that. And the nice thing is, start with it all. And if you then come to an hourly rate of €1,000, you scratch your head and think, that's not going to work for my company. So which parts can I cut out for a while and which can't?
But I think the most difficult thing about setting a budget is that, like, I can come up with an idea, an ideal situation of income that I'd like to have. But when I start my company, I do not get paid immediately. There are other ways to get money, right? You can get shares, or have a rev share, or we can do something with a discount on something. But especially when you start in the industry, like if you're going to launch your game, your money will be there maybe during launch, and not in the years before. So how can you prepare for such an income? Of how do you put that in your budgets?
I always think, and it might seem a bit silly when you're doing it, that you should make a very clear distinction between yourself and your company. Maybe that is what you teach here anyway. Schizophrenic almost. It's you talk to your company talks to you, and it's two different things. So I think also that in your company budget you should put your normal hourly rate, which works for you, even though maybe you can't pay it, but it shows you what you cost. That is your costs budget.
For you as a person, right?
For your company. You have decided what your hourly rate has to be to live. Then you decide how many hours you're going to work in this company for your budget, and that X mile Y shows you what you have to be paid yourself. Your company has to pay you. Don't forget taxes and things like that. You can look it up roughly how much you have to put on. But then, of course, you have a cash problem. That's a different story. And always the difference between cash and income. Well, maybe I shouldn't go that far into that. But
so what's the difference then? Because the income is money, right?
Income, well, you see, if you budget, you say, okay, there's income, et cetera, but as you just said, you might budget in your 5 years the income coming in year 5, but the cash isn't there in year 1 when you do have expenses, and that is something you have to keep in mind. So you can show maybe beautiful profits at some stage, but if you don't, your clients don't pay you till your game is finished, in your case, which is 5 years down the road, you have a cash problem you have to cover. For that, often you have cash flow budgets, but I won't go into all that now. It's a very simple, basic thing that you need cash. So what do? There's a term which I found, which is called bootstrapping.
Bootstrapping, that sounds on me.
I'm sure you've heard of it. It's a tie the belt, basically. But and there they give a lot of examples. The internet is full of it as well. And it comes down to find sources of money, and depending initially is your own savings. They go into the company and go back to you as salary. It doesn't have to go all the way, but in your mind it should be like that. You invest in the company with your savings, and with that the company can do its thing. Maybe the thing is just paying you, but keep that separate, because then you don't get things confused. Because that is one of the problems with startups, especially one-person startups. There's a gray area between what is you and what is the company, and my company doesn't have money, I'll pay for it, or the other way around. I can't pay the Albert Heijn. I'll get something from the company. I'll pay back later. Very dangerous, very dangerous. So try to be silly about it almost, and keep those two apart. But anyway, for funding, and then it's friends, relatives, and fools, they always say, huh? Try to convince them it's temporary. The income is down the line. With your type of business, I'm not that familiar, but there are micro financing companies, but I can't figure out if that is something that you could actually go to, yes or no. You have talked amongst yourselves about crowdfunding routes. That is what you deal with. In your case, I think it's investing before the money comes in, and even more reason, I think, to keep track of what you're doing, to actually know what costs you make, and keep it visible. Because I'm quite sure that down the line, if you go to investors, etc., they want you to have a good feel about it as well. Even if it doesn't come down to if you can show that you know what you're about in that sense, doesn't mean that you have to produce Excel sheets, whatever. In just talking, if you show that you have thought about what it's all about, and etc., your own business, that helps enormously. No, I would actually say the opposite. Don't get lost in Excel sheets. Get back to the basics, the parameters, and those are very simple. I talked to there's quite a few successful entrepreneurs, business people, who, when they talk to me, say, I don't know anything about the numbers. I don't understand it. And taxman talks to me. But they know exactly the fundamental parameters within their company, and they know exactly where money goes, etc. And so keep that in mind. It's the bootstrapping. Yeah. So I don't know if you use personnel, but of course temporary personnel. Have employees on 0-hour contracts, makes you flexible. There's a whole list of things to do.
So I was thinking, aside from the logical stuff, right? Like your hourly rate and work you have to do, and buying your firmware and buying your software licenses and stuff. As a company, you have to do more than only building your game. Right, you have to go to conferences and do some PR and all. Mm-hmm. We've been talking about going to Gamescom, and one of the major reasons not to go was because it's a lot of money. You'll probably spend €1,000 in a week. How's that going? Like, when would you advise people to invest in such an opportunity, or is it like, okay, that's how do they have to make that decision?
It's a good question. I don't know if there's an actual rule. It depends very much, I think, on your type of business. And I can't judge that in your case, but often you have to make yourself shown. What I have done with most of the companies that I worked with is start with a list of everything you would want to do on this in marketing, PR, etc. Count what it costs. Then usually you decide, that's not going to work. Cut back to the essentials. And then set a fixed amount and make it work. And
the most difficult thing for me about these events, like
Yeah.
this going to these conferences now, is that it's kind of unclear how much
Yeah.
money they make for you. If I put, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 levels extra in my game, they might increase the replayability of my game for, I don't know, so much. I can sort of estimate that. But it's kind of hard to decide, like, going to a conference will give me these amounts of leads, bring me in contact with it. It's still a little bit
Yeah.
like
yeah,
unclear.
it is.
So how can I prepare for these unclear income that's not really income? Like
Yeah.
like how do I budget that?
I don't think you budget the income. It's too vague in this specific example. And that is why I say make it a fixed cost and think very hard. Taakstellend budget, we say.
It's part of the job, right? Is that what you're saying?
No, you take you have your fixed amount and you try to make it work as well as possible, but stick to it, because and as far as effectiveness of it all, talk to people who've been there. I mean, you guys have just done it, and you've talked about what worked for some of you, and if you think, hey, that specific thing is really going to work for me, okay, it's worth my half of my budget for next year on marketing or not. But those are soft decisions, and that is why I say make the number hard, and try to work really hard to not waste it. I give you an example. I worked for Pitfalls, which is a big foundation that funds non-profit initiatives in the arts and also in social ventures. Very small projects as well. And we had a big discussion about the marketing budget. Should it go to, we want to reach the whole country. Should it go to, what do you call it, commercials on television? The whole country looks at commercials. Or should we actually pinpoint specific areas, specific groups, etc.? And the end of the discussion was, okay, we have this budget, we can do 10 commercials, or we can go 100 visits, we can do 100 visits. And there it was decided that 10 commercials, the outcome would be 0, because we didn't have the one-on-one contact. So we decided to actually go for these visits. And it was really the clear distinction between, we have this amount of money, I think in that case 100,000 euros or something like that. It's a big company. Yeah.
So if I would translate it to my company,
Yeah.
I would think like, oh, I can go to GDC San Francisco.
No, first, how much have you put away?
And,
That's where you start.
I don't know.
That is where you start, because you find, for instance, it's very painful. You've been somewhere and it's been a waste. There goes half your budget. You'll be tempted to say, oh, but now something really good comes by and I'm sure that works. So I'll go over budget. Well, you can go over budget, but then you have to cut back somewhere else. Give up your lease and go work in your cellar, whatever. Make that decision quite clear. So that's why I say start with how much is in your budget and make that really, just because the outcome is so vague. That is why.
I more had a remark. You were talking about making the decision to go to a trade show or not. I've been working in a sawing automation factory, which goes to every trade show in the wood industry possible, and they say, you need to make 5 times what you invest back. And they figure out all kinds of systems to, well, get their money back. So I applied that to the games industry. And basically, unfortunately, many trade shows, you're not allowed to sell your games on the trade show floor. There's a loophole. You can give rebate codes. So you hand those out, and then you track how many people buy the game with the rebate code. If you make 5 times your return on what you invested for the conference, then usually you're good and you know, well, and that's usually you make a ballpark figure, as in there's 60,000 visitors, maybe about 4% will buy the game, don't know, depending on price. And then you go, is it worth it or not? At 4% of 60,000, all of them buying the game for €5, maybe.
Yeah.
But that's still a guess.
Yeah, but it's excellent. But you started working the numbers already, and you can tell your fellow students here, hey, this is my experience, and they can think for themselves, considering my game, which is completely different or whatever, that's not going to work, or it is going to work, and I'm going to spend half of my budget or my whole budget on this experiment. And that is excellent.
It's very important to find a way to make it measurable, and that's as you said, that's budgeting.
Yeah.
And finding out how to make it budgetable is like going from, I don't know, to we developed a system that we have rebate codes, and we know how many people bought our games, so we know we have a return on investment. Instead of going like, well, somehow the week after the conference we sold 400 games more. Did that come from the conference? Nobody knows.
No.
So I have a question that has to do with a financial plan. So in the financial plan, I want to attract investors, and I want to be able to give them the most accurate description of my budget, essentially, for the up and coming. And it's all kind of fictional in a sense because the company doesn't exist yet. It's all kind of a proposal. How much detail do I need to add into creating the budget?
If you actually talk to investors, a lot. Okay. Yeah. And we might later on actually use the credits format. And I know, are you familiar with it?
I had a look at it already. Yeah.
They are a company that finances small, basically small companies, also companies that can't go to the banks, and they have a system, and that shows you. So, and I always say, start, as I said at the beginning, don't start making budgets for financing companies. Start for yourself first. Again, to get the essentials. Don't let anybody else tell you what they are, etc., etc. Because you'll find otherwise that if you see that, you start going into all sorts of bends and corners that are not essential to what you do or what you are, because it says you have to put something there. And then again, it becomes a fake exercise, basically. So I suggest, even though we're going to look at it just now, suggest to first make the exercise out of your, with your simple boerenverstand, as we say in Dutch. Farmer's mind. Everybody knows, if your wallet is empty or not, and what has the impact. Make it for yourself first, and then go to the translation, and you'll see that you need a lot of details. And again, there, make sure you stay close to yourself.
Yeah. So my second question is then, so if you're coming up with different expense numbers, let's just say that you have the intention of bringing on employees at a certain point, and you start coming up with an ideal wage that you would want to give to them. How do you support your numbers, or what's the most convincing way to support your numbers when you're talking to an investor?
Talk about your parameters. Yes, show how you got them. With every number that you have, be sure that you know how it got there and why. And you'll know if you've done it from your own. You have to. They want to see that you know exactly what you're talking about and that you have thought about it. And if some buts, and often they'll like to see scenarios. Because if you don't provide them, they'll come and they'll say, what if half, or what if double, or so make sure you know the parameters.
Okay, and then because you did bring up scenarios, and I've been interested in that, are there standard kinds of scenarios that you should run beforehand for investors?
No, I think that's industry specific. And I think probably you guys know, again, talk around, talk to people who've gone through it, what can be the swings, apart from general economic swings, but it'll go about your business. The talk will be about your business, and know roughly what the swings are, and that differs. It's not just +10 and -10, and again, explain why it's +30, in what circumstance that could happen, and where it has happened before, and. You can even say +100. It hasn't happened before. So it gives them and yourself also, again, we're a sort of range idea, which is always nice to have in your back of your mind, sort of the quantities you're talking about.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah.
I was curious, like you've been working with so many companies and all, are there any pitfalls that like spring to mind when it comes to budget or financing, or except for not thinking about your budget first and just making decisions?
Yeah.
Are there any typical pitfalls that you see happening all over every time you talk to them?
Well, one of the pitfalls I already talked about is that you don't have this clear distinction between yourself and your company budget. I think the Chamber of Commerce says that you also, for your personal expenses, have to keep a tight budget. I'm like, well, if you have decided what you need, and you've decided your income for your company, stick to your company's budget and make clear, make sure that part fits. Yeah, a pitfall is from not. Making not a good budget that is part of what you really do, is that you lose money and you don't know where it disappears to. I just gave the example of, and then the quick reaction is always, we need to sell more. But sometimes it's not, you need to sell more. It might be somewhere completely different. So make always sure that you know what happens.
So understand where the money comes from and keep it separate from one another.
Yeah,
Basically,
yeah,
those
yeah,
are the
yeah. And another one is it prevents, panic football. Panic football is a.
Let's do some panic soccer here.
Panic soccer. The panic soccer game. It happens very quickly if you don't have a clear idea of what's happening.
I think you kind of covered it before, but I think in our industry, I'll just talk on myself, there's some unpredicted cost factors. And if you show that to an investor, it sounds like, I don't know how much that will cost exactly. And you can give a rough assumption, but it makes you sound very unprofessional, or the investor would just say, well, that's too much of a risk. I don't want to invest in that. Then it puts you in the position where you might just give a number which is just keeping you on the safe side. But on the other hand, it might be too big, or you cannot back it up after if you get too many questions. So it's a bit of a tricky question to, what do we do in that situation?
Make a decision. Yeah, no, it's hard, but make it a founded decision on what you think is the most reasonable number. And you can maybe work with scenarios then, but always force yourself to pick something and not say, well, we don't know roughly. Always, but because you will You say you don't know it, but you know what influences the number. So take those parameters and play with them. Added to this, I can say, be very careful with unexpected expenses items in your budget. Because talking about pitfalls, a huge pitfall, not even not even talking to investors, but for yourself, is you think, I still have this unexpected expenses issue. I put it on there, and that money somehow usually gets spent about 3 or 4 times. It's a rule. Because always you have in the back of your mind, I had this thing about unexpected expenses, so it's okay, I can do this. It's not in the budget, but I can do it. So be very careful with that. I always say, don't put it in. For yourself. And then usually investors will say, how about unexpected expenses? I always say, take a small percentage. But everything else that you don't know, still try to reason through what it could be. And it's hard, but you have to do it. Good luck. And also, you have done that exercise, but keep track. And if you see that you have taken number 10 for something, and you all the time see happening 12, or you hear everybody else around you talking 12, change it. Budgets are not concrete, cutting, how do you say it? But not cast in stone, that is, cast in stone. Budgets are there to tell you what's happening and why and what decisions you make, but not to, you play with it, but also it keeps you in check. But it's like a game. Who's making the first game?
Well, I have a question that I think ties into it, because we're talking about costs right now, but I was also looking in scenario forecasting about the revenue side. And either that is, I can make nothing, which is easy forecast. But usually people say, well, I'm going to take 25% of total market cap, and that's equal to that amount. But that's not also a very likely scenario that will happen. So do you have any tips on that, and especially any tips from your time at the museum? Because I also think it's very difficult to forecast how many people and visitors you will get.
Yeah, that was very difficult. And we I tell you how we did it. It's not, we went for the amount that we thought would make us break even. And the decision on what to charge the visitors was also part of that equation. So a lot of expenditure that we wanted to do, we kept. We didn't budget. The nice to haves, I think you guys call it, huh? So we were careful, and then monitor from the start to know exactly what is happening. So we had a very strict, very strict system to know exactly how many visitors we had, because we also had parties, not normal visitors, but conferences and things like that. And we also, we made sure that also we knew exactly the visitors from there, and that they were paying by their conference fee also the entrance fee, so that our calculations for the turnover we would make were complete. In the old days, it was, we have the visitors, and then everybody has free entrance cards in their drawers, because, hey, we're a museum. And, the parties and the conferences, that's also some income. But we had budgeted on the exactly the number of visitors and what they would bring in per person. So we made sure that everything, all the visitors were actually taken into account, and that we didn't have any free visitors anymore. Now this is, you see, so we were very strict on the parameters of which calculated the income. No free visitors, so the income per visitor wasn't secretly going down, and counting all visitors. I don't know exactly how that relates to your business, but I can, for instance, I think it might be difficult for you guys that you sometimes are bound, you feel forced to give free games or free views, or it might be the rule in the business, I don't know. I always say, be careful. You've made something good. Why give it away for free? I tell you, in the museum, we had all these people that had worked on the museum, and they said, "Oh, we want to show our relations, what we've done. Can we go in?" I said, "No. Well, you can go in, but you pay the entrance fee." But people always say, "Well, I'm just looking." We're just looking. I say, yeah, that's the whole idea of the museum. If you go to a baker and you take the bread and you say, "Well, I just take the bread, I don't have to pay for it." Well, maybe with you guys, I don't know with the games, but it might be the same that the people say, "Oh, well, just look at it. Well, make them pay a small fee. It's a product." Yeah. Well, yeah, and maybe you don't charge the full amount, but the fact that you charge shows that you are very serious about what you do and the quality of your product, and that it is a product and not something to just look at. Also, by charging you add value, basically, literally and figuratively. So don't go for the freebies, I would say. And sometimes it's difficult to, because people expect it.
To be invited, and they said, "We want you to do a pitch, but we want you to do this for free, because you can use us as advertisement. You can use us as, you can say, yeah, you did this hospital, and then we'll give you a testimonial, and we'll give you this for free. I mean, and if you do it for free." Yeah. But we said we don't do that because it's work that you spend a lot of energy in it, and you come there with a vision that you want to present to them, and it's not something you should give away for free, I think. No. I mean, it's something that is energy, although they think like, oh, in 8 hours you think of an idea. But it's not. So yeah, I find it always very difficult.
It is difficult. It is very difficult, and I think you should always have this discussion from the quality of your own company and person, and not of I don't do anything for free, go away. Explain and say, hey, this is what you get, what you do, and for the fact that you will actually write us a testimonial, I'll give you a discount, 10%, 15%.
Yeah, that would be then something you could do, for example, with
that is what you could do. Huh? If people come with that sort of arguments of, hey, by presenting to us, that gives you enormous platform, you can judge that for yourself if that's true, yes or no. But always then say, hey, okay, well, thank you, that's great. I can give you a discount for that bit.
So when I sort of had to bring it all down to like a couple of lessons learned, for me, what I take away from this is that it's super important just to use your farmer's mind and figure out like, okay, this is what I need, this is what I have to get, and just keep it close to yourself. It's not a monster that you have to fight, it's a friend along the way.
Yeah. Right next to you here.
There you go.
You talk to him.
Talk to him, and he helps you in making smart decisions. Yep. And it also helps you if you keep track where your money goes and how you can keep your company financially safe.
it allows you to act, not no panic football, but to act on, make well-founded decisions, and by looking again, coming back to these parameters, they show you what happens, and you don't have to panic or to worry. Sometimes you don't like what it shows, like you with your hours. Sounds very familiar, but and it's sometimes you have to force yourself to face the facts. That's hard. You say, but yeah, hey, that's business.
Well, that's business. Thank you so much. Give a round of applause, please.